our program is called the Essential Six, and it is the 6 topics of this program, the Essential Six, I stole from a colleague of mine. Jane, I'm a trainer at the Workforce Solutions Office, the North Office. I teach 10 classes on how to find jobs. And in our East Office, my counterpart is named James Helton. A lot of you might know him. He has been a trainer in the job search field for years and years and years, a very smart guy. And I never get to go over to watch him train, but there was a water problem in the East Office, and so 10 people from the East Office were in our office this last week while they dry out the Austin Community College building. And so I got to see a little bit of James's training, and in the interview preparation class, or in the interview class, I always say employers are looking for at least 4 things. And these are the 4 things they look for, and here are the kinds of questions that they ask to determine whether or not you have those particular skills or attributes. And James said, I do a similar thing. I talk about 6 things, 6 different things that employers are always looking for. And so I thought that would be a great topic, because I believe, it's interesting, I believe that these essential 6 characteristics are things that are appropriate, valuable, not only to a company in your job, but they're also 6 things that you can also apply to your daily life. These are characteristics that are valuable to your family as well. And the first one is, can you solve my problem? Employers, when they post a job because they have a problem to solve. And they have nobody on their staff who can solve that problem. They have to hire somebody who can come in and write that web content or manage that team or whatever. Can you solve my problem? And obviously this happens in the family as well. Do you contribute? Do you solve problems in the family? Do you contribute in that way? Do you come up with solutions? We need to get this kid here and that kid there and this kid there and that kid there, and how are we going to logistically manage all of that? Are you a problem solver? We do mock interview practice in our office every Thursday. And for about a year, we had on our panel of interviewers the volunteer services of a guy who used to be a director at Dell. After he left Dell, he was a vice president for 2 different companies. And so when he showed up for mock interview practice, we always put him on every single panel asking the questions and getting the critique. We also mock interviewed him a time or 2 because he himself was looking for a job. And I usually would ask the first question in the mock interviews, and I like to start with some big, broad, fat question like, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your background and how your background qualifies you for this job? And sometimes people like to start by sort of explaining how they got into this career field. And I like that stuff. I like to know, how did you get from this to this? How did that happen? Roy did not like that stuff. He said, I don't care about how you got into this field. I have a problem. I have a problem. Can you solve my problem? I want to know, what are the skills you have? What is the background you have that's going to make you qualified to solve my problem? I'm in pain here. And that's what I want to know about. I want to know about your skills, your experience, your certifications, your background, your successes. I want to know if you have the skills that I can use in this job. And so that is a very important thing to be able to communicate right from the get-go to a company. Can you solve my problem? Another thing that James said is very important is, can I trust you? Now, the way that I teach that is manageability. And I'll explain to you how I learned about manageability. Manageability is an issue for me. I feel as though I am not very manageable. I am trustworthy to a point, but I do know this, that stupid rules. Somebody said that I am passive aggressive when it comes to stupid rules, that I'll try to figure out a way to not follow them. So for most of my career, I pretty much hung by a thread. my personnel file is huge, and it'll have an award and 2 disciplinary write-ups, and an award and 3 write-ups and a probation, and an award. But I've been there now for a long time. So once you get to, those of you who are young, once you get this old, it's like, what can you do to me? You know. I don't know, or at least that's my attitude. It could be they could do a lot to me. I don't know. But at any rate, so can I trust you? You go through these, I don't even know, these exercises, these workshops where you have to fall back onto somebody and it's supposed to build team trust and cohesiveness and so forth. But a child needs to know when they take a leap, you're there. You're there. You're not going to stand aside and let this kid fall. You're there for them, and they can trust you, and they can trust you to be there. And so a company has to know that you're trustworthy as well. Will you do what they tell you to do? Will you meet deadlines? Did you lie on your resume? If I give you an assignment, can I trust you to follow through on it? Can I trust you to care about my company? Can I trust you to give me 100% every day? Or are you going to be a slacker? So the way that we discovered this manageability, trustworthy issue really happened just a few years ago. During our mock interview practice, one of the things that we ask you is, tell me the question that you most fear, and therefore need practice answering. And this woman had put down that she feared, why did you leave your last job? There are some manageability red flags. One is if you've owned your own business for a long time. It could be that you're going to have a little bit of trouble following the policies and procedures of somebody else because you feel as though your processes were better. Another is if you've been fired, and especially if you've been fired more than once. It could be that you have a problem with authority. So those are red flags. Those things don't necessarily mean that you wouldn't be manageable, but they're things that make an employer say, I'm going to pursue this a little bit more. So they'll say things like, tell me about a time when you disagreed with your boss. How did you deal with that? Tell me about a time when you had to follow a policy or a procedure with which you did not agree. Tell me about a time when you were faced with an ethical dilemma. If you could have changed something about your last company, what would you have changed? And so things like that can sometimes uncover the manageability issue. And this particular woman had 2 of those red flags. She had owned her own company in another state. She moved to Austin during the recession and had gotten a job with a state agency and had been walked out, terminated before her 6-month probation period. And when we said, why did you leave your last job? She defended herself, argued with us a little bit about having left her last job, and she said, I work for a state agency. They're supposed to give out information to the public, right? And during her training, they said, we give out information about this. Not this. We're not allowed to give out information about this. And she said, well, why not? And they said, well, this is the reason. And she said, well, what if they ask us and we know it? But we don't give it up. We're not allowed to. Well, that's ridiculous. If they ask, if we have the information, if our job is giving out information, anyway, she argued with them. And they said, no, we can't do it. But she had made the decision that if that situation arose, she was going to give out the information. And she did. Her job was answering questions over the phone, and if they asked about that thing, she gave out the information. Well, her cubicle was next to that of her supervisor, who heard her giving out the forbidden information, called her on it, and she refused to mend her wicked ways, and so eventually she got walked out. And she was arguing, defending herself even to us, we don't count. And so this was the first time I had ever heard the word manageability. But one of the people on our interview panel said, you know, I like you. I would never hire you because you are not manageable. And I would always be worried that you're not going to follow my policies. You're not going to follow my rules. You're going to get me into trouble. And you don't learn from your mistakes. I can't trust you. I can't trust you. And he said, if you want to get a job in Austin, you better change the way you talked about that last experience. And you better say, whoa, was that ever a wake-up call? I was so wrong in that, and believe me, I've learned that lesson, and if you hire me, I guarantee you that I will follow your policies and procedures, something. But trustworthiness is a big deal. It's a big deal. Another thing that can make you appear not trustworthy is during an interview, if you give out proprietary information, confidential information, personal information about a former company, boss, product, they can't trust you not to give out the same kind of confidential information about them, so you're not trustworthy. You've already shown yourself to be suspect. So think about it a little bit. Sometimes you overtly demonstrate that you're not trustworthy, and sometimes it just sneaks out in the way that you are talking about something else, and they say, I'm not hiring this person. So can they trust you? Are you manageable? Can they trust you to do the right thing in their company? The third one is, do you fit into my family? And sometimes families are very narrowly confined. I know we have a lot of people in this room who used to work for IBM, and of course the IBM culture was legendary back in the olden days when everybody had to wear the same color shirt and everybody had to have the same kind of cubicle, and there was an IBM look, and if you worked for IBM you had to have that look. Fortunately, both families and corporations in general have a less severe, more open, more inclusive culture where lots of different kinds of people with different skill sets, different lifestyles are accepted both into families and into corporations. But the fit can be important. And some people say, oh, I can fit into any culture. I can get along with everybody. But sometimes it is an issue. It is an issue. Sometimes you have an interview where they say, every other week we like to go down to the ABC Club on 6th Street and just have a happy hour. You in on that? And is that a trick question? Are they testing you? Do they really do that? Do they want to see if you're a party animal? Do they really want to know? Are you somebody that's good with that, that's sociable, that wants to get to know your coworkers better? And so if some people thinking, gosh, Fridays, I really want to go home early and be with my family on Fridays. I don't drink, I don't know that I fit in there. It's a cultural thing, maybe. These days, we've had several presentations on this. There are sometimes 4 or 5 generations that work in the same company. And sometimes the people on the outer edges of those generations don't ever talk to each other. They don't know how to talk to each other. They don't know how to relate to each other. Every time they try to strike up a verbal conversation, the people on the other end of the age spectrum are saying, I'd rather text you. We need you to show up for work 8 o'clock Monday morning. Welcome to the team. The 8 o'clock thing, now what's the reason behind that? We don't have any customers at 8 o'clock. Why do I have to be here at 8 o'clock? Could I work from a coffee shop? I'd be a lot more productive if I could just work on a laptop in a coffee shop and email you my work. Could I do that? And it's like, what? We have to have you in a cubicle at 8 o'clock. And it's like, really? Are you a fit for the family? Are you a fit for the culture? Can you appreciate the gifts that other people bring, which may be different from your own? Can you appreciate the background? Can you appreciate the fact that he started as a cow herder? Does that bring a unique experience and a unique attitude that might be actually helpful even in a corporate high-tech company? Does that have a value in there? Probably so. Let's talk about what that could be. So do you fit the family? Do you bring fresh ideas? Sometimes some of you who have a lot of fresh ideas find that, yeah, they say it, they talk it, but when I bring up fresh ideas, nobody's interested. They don't want to accept my fresh ideas. I'll take my fresh ideas somewhere else. Sometimes your fresh ideas are ideas that are really just an improvement over an existing idea. It still is fresh. It's a different way to do things. Process improvement. How many of you have tried to introduce a new idea, a process improvement, and it has not been well received. Let me just see. Oh my gosh, look at this. This is almost every single hand. I really did not expect that. And don't you know that those companies where you work always said, we are constantly on the alert for new ideas. We really want you, we want you to think out of the box, right? We want creative people, problem solvers. And yet when you come up with an idea, it's like, that won't work. We're not going to do that. We tried that. That didn't work. Yeah, we hired one of those. They didn't work out. We're not hiring anymore. Wow, fresh ideas. So they need to be fresh, but not too fresh. A little bit stale. There's probably a little gray area in there. Fresh, not too fresh, not too stale. Fresh ideas just like the old ones. Victoria?
Or when you propose an idea and it gets shot down and maybe 24, 48 hours later someone proposes the same idea and it's like, oh, this is awesome. Or they implement your idea a year later and never even acknowledge that it came from you, it came from somebody else.
I've heard that over and over and over. How many of you have been the victim of that, where somebody stole your idea, took credit for your idea, implemented it later? Yeah, that sucks. I can't put a happy face on that. It sucks. Yes, sir.
The biggest spin on that, though, is there's always that popular person in that group that can make those proposals. Form an alliance with that person. And say, look, hey, I have this, and I know it's probably going to receive from you. Let's partner on this. So your name's still on that work.
So just to make sure that gets on the video, he said, if there are other people that have these fresh ideas, partner with them. Or partner with the person that's going to do it. Get your name on it at least, so that you have partial credit. But sometimes you can form an alliance with other people who are creative thinkers. Sometimes you can create an acceptable, structured conduit for those good ideas. That's a great example of that, where if somebody came up with a wild idea initially, it doesn't go anywhere. They don't know how to promote it. They don't have the power. But when you create a system to nurture that, then sometimes those great ideas do make it to the forefront. Yes, ma'am?
Yes, I think sometimes that it helps also to present it visually. For example, if you would say to your boss, well, I think we're spending too much money on these gloves. And he's like, okay, whatever, they're still within our budget. But I found that if you actually present it visually, for example, I collected all the gloves that we use and then went and piled them on his table. And he's like, what are all these? And he said, well, these are all the gloves that we actually purchased for our company. And he's like, no, we don't. I didn't know we purchased all of these gloves for our company. And he said, you can actually introduce it visually. And sometimes often that helps.
That's very good. So she said, sometimes when you have an idea or you have a point you're trying to make, and just verbally saying it doesn't work, visually it can, demonstrate it. Lots of people who are decision makers are swayed by numbers. Come and say, here's the data. Here's the data. Here's how it works. Here's this. Before we did this, after we did this, with this, here's the modeling, here's the projection. Sometimes those things work and sometimes they don't. Look how long they've been talking about global warming, since the 60s. I remember seeing a program, a documentary about it in 1985. And we're still having people that say this is happening. So sometimes it takes a long time, even with data, even with visuals, even with proof. But that can very often promote your idea, get your idea going. So do bring fresh ideas. And that works in a family as well. If you are in a family where you take your family vacation every year, you go to the same 3 places, it's boring. But if you're like, let's do this, or here's a memory maker. I want to take you. Let's go visit the highest mountain in each of the countries in the Western Hemisphere. Let's go look at all the rivers, major rivers in the country. Let's go make our way, to the, I don't even know what, to the each state capital. Let's do an adventure let's visit every one of the national parks. And it's like, yeah, I never knew what we were going to do next because we had some of our best times doing these kinds of things. And my parents came up with the best ideas always. So getting out of the rut, doing something that's innovative, put a hand up. Yes, sir.
So I think what Chad was talking about, and what you acknowledged was collaboration of idea generators, that you can get a lot of good ideas that come out of collaboration and people to do that. I think the gentleman back here was speaking more about connecting an idea generator who may not always be the best at presenting to a consensus builder who would then bring that and be able to generate more interest in it.
Yeah, I totally understand that as well. So there's the group together, the brain trust creative people, and there's a creative person paired up with a presenter. So you've got your idea person, and you've got your kind of administrative get it through the process person as well. I have a great story about fresh ideas. Right, number 4. I'll tell it real fast. One of the things that I do in my class is I give you a personality test and talk a little bit about how those personalities exhibit themselves in the workplace and in your family. And one of the personalities is the random, great idea person, an instigator of things, not a great finisher of things, not very organized, real outgoing, real chatty, and frequently those people marry their opposite, which is the introvert, orderly, organized, analytical, other kind of person. And when I was talking about this guy said, I have a great example of a marriage that has worked well, but we are those two people. I am the analytical one, my wife is the other one. And he said every year we would go on a family vacation, and I would always plan it out in detail, where we were going to stop, where we were going to stay, what we were going to see, what we were going to do. We had our itinerary, we had our agenda, we had our budget, and it all worked great. And she said one day, I have a great idea for our family vacation. This year, let's pack our stuff and let's head out, and every time we come to an intersection, let's flip a coin and see where we end up. And he said, I don't think that's a good idea. And so they wrangled over that for a long time until they finally decided on a compromise. They would have a destination. It would be Las Vegas. There were lots of things to do, but they would not have a plan. They would not have a reservation, they would not have a plan, they would not have an agenda, they would just do spontaneously what seemed like fun. And they set off, and he is full of trepidation. There was no plan, there was no plan. And they got to Las Vegas, and it was some kind of a gamblers conference or something. They had to drive another hour to find a place to stay. He said he just bit his lip, he didn't say a word, but that's the kind of thing. So, but sometimes there are some people that just constantly come up with, this would be fun, let's do this. And fresh ideas. Can they fly, can they not fly? Connections, I never think about this as a reason for somebody to get hired, but I know every once in a while it does work. Whom do you know that I know, and whom can I meet through you? So the whom do you know that I know, getting somebody on the inside to put in a good word for you. Lisa Revelette, is that it? Lisa Revelette she mock interviewed yesterday, and there's a company that she was going to apply for a job. She found a really good job, and just out of the blue, she realized that her husband's best friend, he was the best man at his wedding, works there as a director, and she never even had made that connection. And I guess her husband talked to him and said, Lisa would like to apply for this job. And he said, oh my gosh, she would be perfect. Let me put in a good word for her. And so he did, and she had a phone interview today? Tuesday. Next Tuesday, she has a phone interview, and he is really promoting her. He's very confident that she's going to get this job. And that's the deal. Even if you're well qualified, it is such an advantage to have somebody on the inside who is pushing them to hire you on the inside. Just take a look at it is good enough. So who do you know, and are you well connected so that the people that you know might be useful? Especially in sales, we have salespeople here today. Not that you necessarily would be able to bring those former clients to a new company, but you know people within that industry that might prove to be helpful. So that might be something that would get you a job, and in your private life it might help as well. We won't go into a lot of detail on it because we're already late, but Tipping Point, those of you who've read The Tipping Point, that book starts out by talking about 3 different kinds of people, only 2 of which I can remember: connectors and mavens. Then there's something else. But connectors are people who are well connected, obviously, and they talk about Paul Revere. Paul Revere was a connector. You never read that in history books, but they said Paul Revere was well connected. He had his silver shop. He would go up and down the East Coast selling his silver and meeting people. He's very gregarious. He'd go to the public houses. He'd, have a brew with somebody, and he knew the people. He knew the leaders in the communities. He was very sociable. There was another writer that night spreading the word that the British were coming. And his name is William Dawes. You never really hear much about William Dawes because he was not. This was the Tipping Point's point of view. He was not a connector. So they had to wait for the light, the signal, to go into Old North Church, and one by land, 2 by sea. So it's dark. It's nighttime. They set off, and they go in opposite directions. But Paul Revere goes to these little towns. He goes to the house of the mayor. He knocks on the door. He says, "Spread the word. The British are coming." And he knows exactly where to go. He knows the key people to alert. William Dawes was not a connector. He pulled into these little towns. It's dark. Everybody's asleep. And he's like, if I knock on a door, are they going to shoot me? What's going to happen? I don't know where to go. Everything's closed up. You never hear about it. That part of the United States was not well alerted. So having connections can be an asset when you're looking for a job. And the last thing is, can I make money with you? And this also relates to number 1. Can you solve my problem? Can I make money with you? In the family, it's are you a benefit? Are you benefiting this family? What are you contributing to this family? What do you contribute in the workplace that can either save me time, make me money, something that is going to be bottom line productive? And that is the message that you're going to be trying to get across to the employer.